world of nights. And so he prepared himself, made ready to live in this world of knight errant. One of the things that he did was that he went up to the attic and he was able to find a uniform, just so they could wear it, such as a knight would wear it. Polished it up, it looked very nice, and it was made out of plate, and so it would have deferred or it would have stopped the sword coming in. So this suit of armor. And he also found a sword. And he found this sword, and again he polished it up, and he made it very, very sharp. But a knight needs a horse. And there was this old horse that could barely get around, very old, nag. He decided to name it Rocinante, just to give it the feel, just to give it that flavor, this wondrous horse out there. But it's about the facade. It's about the presentation, not about reality. But a knight, in order to go out and do these deeds, has to have a purpose, has to have a reason. There has to be, you can't just go out to be a knight, and you do these valiant acts for someone. He saw a young girl walking by one day. In his mind, he renamed her Dulcinea del Toboso. So he has all of this going on in his head, but he doesn't have the covering, the helmet. That's the one thing that's missing from the armor. So what he does is he decides to form one out of paper mache. And he does a wondrous job of it. Paints it black, does everything to it so that it shines. It looks like the actual armor that he has, that he already has. But he decides to test it. And he decides to test this by taking that sword of his, because after all, he is going to go on. He has his lance ready to go. He decides to test it by taking that sword and swinging it at the helmet. In fact, it cuts it right in half. But when he started it, he decided, well, let's do it again. Use the same paper mache. Went through the same process again. Shine looks exactly like the armor. Lifted that sword. Go after it again. Stop. He said to himself, no, I'm going to have faith. I want you to trust. Even though you already know that it isn't going to work and it's not truthful, I'm going to have faith. I'm going to have belief. That's what they want you to have in this case. That individual, obviously, is Don Quixote de la Mancha. He renamed himself. And although here in the United States we've sort of romanticized him, the notion of Don Quixote de la Mancha as someone who tells and is something glorious to tell after, the book is a little bit different. The book is about an individual who goes senile and refuses to accept the truth, refuses to accept the facts, and then makes up another reality. And when things don't go his way, well, then it's not his fault. It's the necromancers or the magicians who changed, for example, the serpents that he was about to attack. And so we get, of course, everyone's familiar with this, his attack on the windmills. He actually believes that these windmills are actually dragons. And so he starts charging on down there. Sancho Panza is one believer, which is what Richard Chrisman wants you to be, is Sancho Panza. His one believer says, don't do it. Don't do it. Those are actually just windmills. Undeterred, Don Quixote charged down there on that old Negros Rocinante, stabs one of the leaves as it turns around, and of course he is hurt. And he says, you know, I have been robbed of my glory by the magicians. I have been robbed because they changed the reality from where it really was. But I have belief. And that's what the defendant wants you to have in this particular case. Exhibit 364. That's reality. When a handgun is fired, a bullet comes out at the end, and there are particles that shoot out. Like this. Some of the particles even come up faster than the bullet itself. And when they hit skin, they produce welts. They produce burns. They produce a pattern. And it's called stippling. You could also call it tattooing. In this case, you did have some tattooing. You had it in the center of the chest of Daniel Rodriguez. But the defendant, and there are no voids there, but the defendant wants you to believe that this right here, Exhibit 364, is a magic gun. He wants you to just believe that whatever forensic research has shown with regard to a bullet when it's fired does not apply in this case. And it can't apply in this case if you are to believe what he told you. Because these things here, these gunpowder is coming out at about 2,000 degrees, that is coming out sometimes faster than the bullet. And if they're in close proximity to something, you can plant them. Go different ways. They will not produce a pattern. But he wants you to believe, though, there was something in between him and Daniel Rodriguez. He wants you to believe that the bicycle was in between. But the problem for him, and the reality of it, that he refuses to accept, is that that is an intermediary object that will interrupt this flow here of gunpowder as it's flying out. And if it's held in the position that he demonstrated to you, and he demonstrated it in this council when he stood here, you saw how high up it was, and you saw how close they were. They can say to you, well, perhaps he stuck it in between one of the openings there in the bicycle. Well, he never said that. But he knew if he did do that, then the cone, then the pattern would be much thicker. So no, he has to have the gun back, and that's how he demonstrated that he had the gun. If he has the gun back, and this cone is spreading out, you can see this is inches out. You can already see the cone. Yeah. You wouldn't have had the pattern from Daniel Rodriguez's chest with the first shot, because that is the first shot. All of the medical evidence points that way. They want you to say, no, that. You don't know what is the first shot. Yeah, you do. You can use your common sense. You can listen to what Jeffrey Johnston had to say, and you can see the pattern to know that that was the first shot. You can also know that by the other bullet that is in the wall. You can, of course, have somebody to come along and help you in your endeavor in believing that this is a magic bullet. You can have somebody like Vincent DeMaio who says, no, you can't believe anything that comes from the wall. Why? Because I say so. And I say that because I've sat through a class and I've taken a handout. And I can come in and read to you. That makes me an expert. Although the preeminent expert in the United States says, no, of course you can use that. Of course you can use that. Well, I want you to ignore the science of Reconstruction. They want you to ignore the testimony of Lucian Haig. And they want you to ignore what really is this cone as it comes out. If this, and this is the science, then it couldn't have happened the way that before. Because the first shot went in here, there was nothing in the way. There are no voids in here. We know that there can be voids in this. If Daniel Rodriguez did nothing right in his life, nothing, let's assume he did nothing right in his whole life, well, except one thing. Died without a shirt on. And that was a canvas able to tell us distance, is able to show us whether or not there was something intermediate. He did nothing in his life. He was able to do that. At least he died without a shirt. He died so that we could see this pattern And this pattern is an undisturbed pattern. It doesn't have any voids. The reason that we know that is because he has a void. He does have a void pattern of stippling in his body. He has both. So that, yes, you can see that there will be a void if something gets in the way, such as an arm. And in this case, we do have a void right here. What that tells you is that there was nothing in between at that point when that first shot was fired. And this was the first shot. And he was leaning backwards like this. Because if he would have been leaning forward, his hands, the way that the defendant demonstrated, well, they would have had stippling on his hands because they're much closer to the business end here. They would have been much, because he's holding the bicycle there. He would have had it all over his fingers. If we are to believe what the defendant says, because the hands are much closer. But no, they didn't have that. He didn't have anything here. Nothing other than right here, which indicates that the hands were not in line with the bullet, even though they don't want you to believe that. His hands were here. That's where his hands were. Exactly where Sergio Ruggiero told you that they were. Have faith. Right? That's what they want you to do. And in terms of the second shot, you gotta have faith and believe. That's at the Maya where he says that, that's sort of the first shot. Well, no, when somebody gets shot, it hurts. And people recoil, move away from them. And that's what happened in this case. It was approximately the same distance so that you could actually see the pattern here and then avoid. He wants you to believe that. No, don't believe the signs. Don't believe reality. Believe magic. Because actually, these rings right here, magic them. It can go, even though it's blasting away like a dust storm at 2,000 degrees. Went on, around, under that bike frame. Didn't touch a single spot. Well, only in the world of sorcerers can that be possible. They got that. I want you to believe it. The other thing that indicates that he wants you to live in this mythical world with him is the issue of blood. Blood spouting out that day. You've seen the photographs. You've seen that the blood was as high as the door up here. You saw that the bicycle, which is approximately 3 feet a little bit higher, also had some blood on it. And you also saw that the box to the north also had some blood on it. And you saw, according to what they tried to prove, they talked about water with Detective Porter and whether or not there was blood there. They tried to show that over and over, that there was blood. Maybe forgetting about something in the future that may bring that into more focus. But there's blood here. And according to here, right about here, the box is where he took the shot. You heard that? That means he has to go quite a ways there. And this is the area with most blood. This is where he claims the bicycle was thrown. If that is where it happened, and the bicycle is up, after the first shot, which is right here to the chest, there's blood. It's going to start coming up. And immediately, the way he said, just milliseconds later, the other one goes out, then there's going to be more blood. The lungs are affected. Heart still pumping. We don't die immediately. Daniel Rodriguez did not die immediately. And so if that's the case, turn around, blood going over there. If he's standing there, well, he didn't get any blood on him. Magical blood. Because if the blood's coming out in that fashion, it would have hit waist high, maybe a little higher. But it didn't. He wants you to believe that somehow that blood, or it could be that Daniel Rodriguez was standing there. The only surgeon, as Joe said, took a shot and then walked down. This reality, not this mythical world where blood stops stops pumping when somebody gets near. And lastly, this issue about the black being so high up and being moved in this direction. Again, we're talking about movement here. And movement forward does not stop in the book. It just keeps going forward. The body, talking about whatever item is being moved forward. And if he is in that position, as he indicated, Hitler would have been the face. Would have been right around this area like this, the way he demonstrated it, not the chest. Because, according to him, he was coming like this. Here, the way he hit the face. Stippling doesn't discriminate. Stippling doesn't change. It comes out with the bullet. And that's reality. That's not the world where mythical creatures exist and where magic is the order of the day. In the story of not much, actually, he comes to his senses. And he comes to his senses, and prior to coming to his senses, he has a talk with Sancho Panza. He talks to him about coming to his senses. And in fact, he says, well, I was wrong. I actually used to read books and stuff in my brain. And you, Sancho, need to go back where you belong. You need to go back to reality. You can't be in this world because it doesn't exist. Just like a defendant wants you to join him in that world. It does not exist. It's a world that he wants you to live in. It's a world where he avoids the consequences of his actions. And that's what he wants. And so, Don Quixote tells Sancho this. And Sancho says, no, I believe you now. One person. I believe you now. I do believe in this magical, mythical world. Every one of them, yes, to be a Sancho Panza. He is mythical, magical world. I ask you instead to look at reality. I ask you instead to consider the testimony of Sir Joseph Hill. Instead to look at the photographs. Consider the science. The testimony of Jeffrey Johnston. And I ask you to consider what their witnesses said. Catherine Black, about his attitude. Consider what we know about whether or not he checked his taser and how he acted that day. Consider all of that, and most importantly, consider the jury instructions. If you do, and if you do not go to this world of fanciful belief, you will cry. And I'm asking you to return a verdict of guilt. Guilty of second-degree murder, because there is no justification for killing Daniel Rodriguez. There just isn't. He may believe that, but there isn't. Guilty of the aggravated assault of Daniel Rodriguez. Common sense will tell you that killing or bringing a gun and putting it to somebody's head will make them fearful, will make them apprehensive. And what can I say about the killing of the dog, Junior? That is absolutely something that should not have happened. The dog was not aggressive. According to their own witness, Catherine Black, it was a happy dog. And right before he was killed, he wasn't barking. And after he was killed, he really was afraid of him. He would continue shooting him because the dog kept moving. It was rendered a paraplegic. It moved until he died. I'm asking you to return a verdict of guilty on all of the charges. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, so that Mr. Marins can set up the exhibits, we'll let him do that. If you go back to the jury room, we'll bring you back as soon as that's done. Please remember the admonition, keep an open mind, don't discuss the case bring you back in a few minutes. You're excused. Anything for the record for now, Mr. Martinez? Mr. Marins?
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Marins, just let me know when you're ready.